It's really hard to know what you can do to help. How can you help? How can you help solve the problem rather than just be a victim of the problem? So that was really exciting when we started to think, actually, we can be part of the solution.
This looks like an ordinary farm, but it's here that a life-saving device is being built.
So what are you going to be working on this afternoon?
I'm going to be fiddling with my knobs.
That's what I was worried about.
Over the past 6 weeks, Ballarat company Gecko has been developing a ventilator.
Australia was looking like it was going to be in dire straits, and we decided that we would maybe stupidly, maybe not, that we would go ahead and invent our own machine.
The machine that helps sick people breathe has been designed and tested at home by company owners Sandy and Elizabeth Lewis-Gray. Sandy is the brains behind the design, while Elizabeth has worked on getting a government grant and is bringing in local businesses to provide parts and support.
Well, the process has been fascinating. I've had to start from scratch, obviously. I knew nothing about ventilators. I knew nothing about the pulmonary system of a human being or how we breathe, other than the fact I do it all day myself. I never really thought about it. So this valve will go in here.
Yeah.
Instead of that one will go away.
Yeah.
And we're going to get a new valve that's going to be taken. This stuff will go out.
Oh, yeah.
The husband and wife team normally make gold mining equipment that's manufactured in Ballarat and is sold across the world.
Gecko Systems developed and was started on the back of the inline pressure jig, and the control system that runs that inline pressure jig is very similar to the control system of a ventilator. It's an input and output type system which drives basically a lung up and down in our machine, and so that was really what we had started to look at, adapting that into what we're doing today with the ventilator.
I suppose the thing about something like the coronavirus or COVID is it's really hard to know what you can do to help. How can you help? How can you help solve the problem rather than just be a victim of the problem? So that was really exciting when we started to think, actually, we can be part of the solution.
The idea for a homegrown ventilator came back in March, when Australian cases of COVID-19 were increasing rapidly.
I think we were overwhelmed by the modelling and by the prospect of having hundreds of thousands of people. Come on in.
Ballarat anaesthetist Doug Paxton has been helping to get the device to a clinical standard. A high-end ventilator like this one can cost about $100,000, but the new machine will be much cheaper.
This is a very expensive piece of equipment, and we only have 6 of them in our intensive care unit. So if we had 50, 60 or 70 patients as was predicted, we would be in trouble.
So how different will the Gecko ventilator be to this?
So the Gecko ventilator is a magnificent ventilator in itself, has been designed from scratch by someone who's probably never seen a ventilator like this, and it's going to be able to do some of the things that we can do with this ventilator, but it obviously has some limitations.
Australia's need for ventilators may be on hold, but that doesn't mean the Ballarat team has been wasting its time. There are hopes it will fill a gap, particularly in regional and rural parts of the country.
We're out of the first surge. Who's to say there's not a second surge coming? There will be outbreaks of the COVID virus throughout our community, and it may be that it's in our area. And that's when the resources that are made available to us through developments such as the G-Venter might be helpful in that situation.
It doesn't require the full ICU environment. It can operate on an oxygen bottle. It doesn't require full power. It can operate on the battery of a car if necessary. Now, obviously, you'd still need intensive care support.
A number of the parts for the ventilator have been designed by Sandy and made mostly in Ballarat.
I guess the crisis was that we knew that we couldn't get componentry, normal componentry that you might get because of all the demand that there was going to be worldwide. So we decided to look at making our own machine from our own components or from locally sourced components as much as possible.
One of the key parts was a valve. To design it, the couple called on a local innovation lab that helps companies create prototypes.
The lab has 3D printers, laser cutter, vinyl cutter, milling machine, a whole heap of sewing equipment, industrial and semi-industrial stuff. And it's a community access lab. It's designed for prototyping, small-scale manufacture, innovation.
Overnight, technician Ian Ferns printed the newly designed valve.
We were able to get some good first prototype parts out the first time. The design kind of iterated over a few weeks, some improvements. So once they had a piece that was actually working in hand, they identified some issues with it and were able to adjust for those. We were able to produce new parts for them.
And the printing has allowed us to look and touch and feel. We literally send the guys a drawing overnight and they come back to us the next day with the parts and send them to us.
I think services such as this can really bring back that local manufacture. It can support our industries. As we've seen with the ventilator, bringing together teams of people, different industries that wouldn't normally work together, there's an opportunity there to come up with solutions.
As well as 3D printing, Gecko has sourced as much as it can locally, including hydraulics, stainless steel, electrical fittings and highly specialised machining.
For a small regional town to come up with its own ventilator that could potentially help, even if it only helps one life, is absolutely fantastic. And if it has enough legs to go and help many more in the region, then all the better.
The regions are often forgotten, and to have a project like this gives hope.
While there's a lot of hope that the coronavirus pandemic could spark a wave of manufacturing onshore, particularly in regional towns like Ballarat, there's also concern that protectionist policies globally could restrict Australian manufacturers' ability to export.
We have seen a lot of our manufacturing jobs go offshore in some sections of manufacturing. And I suspect that there's some enthusiasm for putting up some of those barriers to protect our industries again. But look, I'm not convinced. I think for a relatively small country like ours, it's very hard to sustain a highly efficient manufacturing sector. We just don't have the scale internally, and the more that we cut ourselves off from these international markets, I think there's generally been a negative outcome for us.
I definitely believe the world will become more protectionist. More protective of their economic capability. But when it comes to, I think, complex manufacturing, when it comes to manufacturing in areas where we have global competitive advantage, like mining technology, like medical device technology, I think definitely that is an area we should be heading towards.
Economist Kim Horton says the survival of regional manufacturing depends upon communities and industries working together, like they have in Ballarat.
From a regional business perspective, it really does make a difference if you can go down the street and see what somebody else is doing. If you've got that confidence that their systems are going to work well and that they'll be able to deliver what they're saying on time, then it really helps to build that local cluster capability.
I mean, I guess being rural and regional, what's amazing is community. So the community have come together. We've had all sorts of different people, from engineers to clinical people to people supplying parts and componentry to people who can source stuff and procurement. It's been amazing just who's actually come out of the woodwork and approached us to help.
As part of receiving government funding, the ventilator needs to be ready to go into production by the end of May. They still have a big hurdle to overcome, getting the machine approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
The role of the ventilator could be quite significant in Australia and globally. It just really depends on how the pandemic plays out, and if it doesn't end up playing a significant role, it's a backup plan.